The sign outside read Maggie's Diner, its neon letters half burnt out, buzzing faintly against the wide Arizona sky. Daniel Mercer hadn't planned to be anywhere near this place. His schedule was supposed to look very different: a quick drive to Phoenix, a boardroom meeting, and a stack of investment proposals waiting for his signature. Instead, thanks to a blown tire on the interstate outside of Yuma, here he was, stepping into a diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1980s. The air smelled of bacon grease and burnt coffee. The booths were patched with duct tape, a faded jukebox leaned against the wall, and the laminated menus had seen better days. Daniel adjusted the cuffs of his blazer, instantly aware of how out of place he looked among the truckers in ball caps and the farmhands with sun-creased faces. He slid into a corner booth, ordered a black coffee, and reached for his phone. That's when he heard it. "Morning, need something to eat?" The voice froze him. He looked up. "Before we go any further, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now, let's begin." The woman standing before him with a notepad in hand was Sophia Reyes. Not just a waitress named Sophia, the Sophia. His best friend from junior high. The girl who used to drill him on math problems on the front steps of her mom's building. The same one who told him not to care when kids laughed at his worn-out shoes. Back then, she'd been the one with all the big dreams. Now, she stood in front of him wearing a faded apron, her hair tied up loosely, and a tired smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She hadn't recognized him, at least not yet. She was too busy wiping her hands on a rag, shifting her weight like she'd been on her feet all day. Daniel's chest tightened. It had been over 20 years. They had once promised each other they'd escape the dead-end neighborhood they grew up in and never look back. He had done exactly that, built a real estate empire across half a dozen states, made magazine covers, lived in penthouses. But Sophia? Her hands trembled slightly as she scribbled his order. Her shoulders sagged like the weight of years pressed down on them. Then she looked at him again. Her eyes narrowed. "Wait. Danny?" "Daniel Mercer," she asked slowly, head tilting. He rose slightly from the booth. "Hey, Sophia. Long time." A quiet laugh escaped her lips. "No kidding. What are you doing in a hole-in-the-wall like this?" He could have told her the truth: a flat tire, bad luck, nothing more. But something in her voice made him soften his words. "Just passing through," he said. She opened her mouth as if to ask more, but a shout came from the kitchen. With a quick glance over her shoulder, she excused herself. The cook barked at her to grab plates, and in one smooth motion she balanced 2 steaming dishes on her arm, weaving between tables with a rhythm that screamed of years doing this exact job. Daniel leaned back in his seat, fingers drumming his mug. In his world, people waited on him, never the other way around. But here, he was just another customer in line. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he couldn't take his eyes off Sophia Reyes. After dropping off food and refilling a few glasses of iced tea, Sophia finally circled back. This time, she didn't just stand over him, she slid into the booth across from Daniel for a moment, tucking her notepad into her apron. "Okay," she said with a small grin, "I knew it. It's definitely you." Daniel chuckled softly. "Guess I haven't changed that much." "Not true," she teased, her eyes flicking over his suit, his polished shoes, and the gleam of the watch on his wrist. "You look like somebody who belongs on TV, not in Maggie's Diner." He smirked. "Maybe I just learned how to dress better." Her laugh was genuine this time. "So, where did life take you, Daniel Mercer?" He hesitated. He knew too well what the words real estate mogul or billionaire investor did to people. They shifted, stiffened, started treating him like someone to envy or fear. And with Sophia, the last thing he wanted was that kind of distance. "I've been working in real estate," he answered carefully. "It keeps me busy." Her brows rose. Real estate? Like selling houses? Something like that, he said, taking a sip of coffee to dodge the full truth. Her eyes lingered on him, curiosity flickering there, but she didn't push further. Instead, she tilted her head. So, you just passing through Yuma? Yeah, just a stopover, he said. That's rare. Most people who stop here are truckers or regulars. Or they're lost. Daniel chuckled. I guess that makes me lost. She reached for his menu. I'll put your order in. Don't vanish on me. He watched her cross the floor, greeting customers by name, slipping into easy conversations, smiling at people who barely noticed her. Years ago, they had sat on a stoop, sketching out plans for a bookstore they'd open together, bright walls, bean bags, shelves stuffed with novels, maybe even a little stage for local kids to read their poems. Now here she was, balancing plates instead of books. When Sophia came back, she set a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of him. On the house, she said lightly. Daniel shook his head. You don't have to do that. I want to. It's not every day someone from the old neighborhood walks through those doors. She poured him more coffee, then sat back down with her own cup. Daniel studied her face as she stirred in sugar. There were faint laugh lines at the edges of her eyes, but also the heavier shadows of fatigue. Her hands bore tiny scars, and the skin was rougher than he remembered. So, she said, looking at him, what's real estate like? Are we talking flipping houses or something bigger? Bigger, he said carefully. Commercial buildings, apartment complexes. A bit of everything. She raised her eyebrows, impressed but trying not to show it. That sounds intense. It has its moments. She smiled faintly. Good for you. You always did push yourself harder than anyone. Remember when you helped me cram for history even though you couldn't stand it? Daniel laughed. Still can't stand it. I only helped because you threatened to stop tutoring me in math. This time, her laugh was real, warm, familiar, and filled with the echoes of the past. It's strange seeing you here, Sophia admitted, glancing down at her cup. Makes me think about all those things we used to dream about. The bookstore, he asked softly. Yeah. Her smile flickered, then faded. Guess life had other plans. Daniel wanted to press, to ask what had happened. But the heaviness in her voice told him it wasn't something to drag out in the middle of a noisy diner. How long have you been here? He asked instead. She shrugged. A while. It's steady work. Pays the bills. The flatness in her tone said more than any explanation could. Just then, the diner's bell jingled as another group walked in, and Sophia's practiced smile slid back into place. Duty calls, she said, pushing herself up from the booth. Daniel watched her disappear into the crowd of customers, her apron tied too tight, her shoulders carrying more than just trays. He picked at his toast, his mind unsettled. This was Sophia, the girl who once dreamed bigger than anyone he knew. And now, all he could see was someone who had quietly settled for less. Daniel lingered in the booth longer than he usually would. He wasn't used to waiting for anyone. Normally, people made time for him. But here, watching Sophia weave between tables with her tired smile and steady hands, he realized he could wait as long as it took. She carried plates with effortless rhythm, dodging a toddler who darted underfoot, laughing politely at an old farmer's corny joke. But Daniel noticed the cracks, the way her smile fell the moment no one was looking, the way she rubbed her wrist like it ached, the way her eyes drifted out the front window a second too long before she forced herself back into motion. When the lunchtime rush thinned, Sophia drifted back to his booth, leaning against the edge. You still talk to anyone from the old neighborhood? She asked. Daniel shook his head. Not really. Life got busy. Her lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Yeah. Same here. Just, busy looks a little different for me. He caught the edge in her tone. You want to talk about it? Sophia hesitated. For a moment, her eyes flickered with something unspoken. Then she shook her head. Not here. Not with Manny trying to eavesdrop. She tilted her chin toward the cook in the back, a heavy-set man pretending to scrub the counter while clearly leaning out to catch every word. Daniel smirked. Some things never change. You free after my shift? She asked cautiously. If I can get someone to cover the last hour, maybe, she trailed off, biting her lip. But why? What is this really about, Danny? He held her gaze. Just catching up. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He wanted answers. He wanted to understand how the girl who once dreamed of running the world had ended up serving coffee in a half-forgotten diner. Before she could say anything else, a trucker at the counter waved his empty mug impatiently. Sof. Refill. Sophia rolled her eyes but forced another smile. Story of my life. She turned to go, and Daniel caught something he hadn't noticed before, a faint limp in her step. Subtle, but there. It told him more than words ever could. Whatever life had thrown at Sophia Reyes, it had been heavier than she was willing to admit. And Daniel was only just beginning to understand how deep it went. The diner had nearly emptied by the time Sophia returned, this time without her apron. She slid into the booth across from Daniel, her hair now down, falling loosely around her face. Without the uniform, she looked a little less like the weary waitress and a little more like the girl he remembered, the one who used to believe the future was hers for the taking. I've got 30 minutes before my relief shows up, she said, folding her arms on the table. You wanted to talk, so, talk. Daniel leaned forward. I wanted to know how you've been. Really been. She let out a dry laugh. You sure you want the honest version? That's the only version I'm interested in. Sophia studied him for a moment, as though weighing whether he could handle it. Then, with a quiet sigh, she began. After high school, I got into Arizona State on a scholarship. Thought it was my ticket out. But halfway through, my mom got sick. I dropped out to take care of her. Bills piled up. I never went back. Daniel said nothing, letting her speak. I married someone I thought was steady. Thought maybe I could rebuild my plans with him. But, he liked casinos more than responsibility. Every dollar we had ended up on a blackjack table in Laughlin. When I finally asked questions, he walked out. 2 years ago. Haven't seen him since. Her eyes dropped to her hands, fingers fidgeting with the rim of her cup. So yeah. I've been here ever since. Tried other jobs, but this one's steady. Not much else in Yuma unless you've got a degree, and, well. She gave a small shrug. Daniel's chest tightened. Sophia. Don't, she interrupted, raising a hand. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. It's just life. Some people climb high. Some of us get stuck in places like this. He shook his head. No. That's not what I see. You didn't lose, you got knocked down. There's a difference. Her lips curved into a faint smirk. Easy for you to say. Sitting there in a suit worth more than my car. Daniel leaned back, his gaze steady. Maybe. But that doesn't mean I've forgotten where I came from, or the people who helped me get here. Something in her eyes softened at that. So what are you saying? Daniel didn't answer right away. Because what was forming in his mind wasn't just about offering her dinner or slipping her a little cash. No, what he was thinking could change her life entirely, if she let him. And he wasn't sure she was ready to hear it yet. The night air outside had cooled by the time Daniel and Sophia stepped out of the diner together. The neon sign buzzed faintly above them, casting a pinkish glow across the empty parking lot. For a moment, they just stood there, two old friends separated by years, staring at each other like they were trying to piece back together fragments of a puzzle that had been scattered long ago. Do you ever think about it? Daniel finally asked. Think about what? She replied. Back then. When we swore we'd get out of this town and never look back. Sophia smiled faintly, though it carried a trace of sadness. We had a list, remember? A notebook full of places we'd go. New York, Paris, Tokyo. Don't forget Rome, Daniel added with a soft laugh. You said you'd eat pizza on the Spanish Steps even if it got you arrested. That memory pulled a real laugh from her, one that lit up her tired face for the first time all night. God, I'd forgotten that. Daniel's expression softened. You never forgot. You just buried it. For a moment, silence settled between them. Sophia looked down at her shoes, scuffed from endless shifts. Life doesn't always follow the plan, Daniel. You were always the dreamer. I was the realist. I guess reality won. He shook his head. No. Reality doesn't win. People just stop fighting. She glanced up at him, a flicker of irritation flashing in her eyes, but behind it was something else. Hope. Something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. You make it sound easy, she whispered. Daniel stepped closer, his voice low but steady. It's not easy. But it's possible. And maybe you don't have to fight alone anymore. Sophia's breath caught. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a voice called from across the lot. Hey, Sophia. You coming or what? Her coworker, an older man with a cigarette dangling from his lips, waved impatiently from the back door of the diner. Her shift wasn't quite over yet. Sophia exhaled slowly, her moment with Daniel slipping away like sand through her fingers. Duty calls, she said softly. Daniel gave her a small nod. Then I'll wait. And as she turned back toward the diner, Daniel felt something stir inside him, a certainty. He hadn't come back to Yuma just to remember the past. He'd come back to change her future. Daniel waited in the parking lot, leaning against his car, watching the neon sign flicker like a heartbeat that was almost too weak to continue. The night deepened, and with it came a heavy stillness broken only by the hum of passing trucks on the highway. When Sophia finally emerged, her apron balled up in one hand, her eyes looked more tired than before. But there was relief too, the kind you feel when the weight of the day finally slips from your shoulders. Sorry, she said, tugging at her jacket. Took longer than I thought. Manny doesn't like covering for anyone, even if it's just a few minutes. Daniel smirked. Still the same old Manny, huh? Some people never change, she replied. Her voice was lighter now, almost playful, but Daniel could see the fatigue in the way she walked, in the way her shoulders carried a burden invisible to everyone but her. They strolled down the quiet street, streetlights buzzing faintly overhead. Daniel broke the silence first. So what happened, Soph? What really happened to all those dreams? She stopped walking. Her gaze dropped to the cracked pavement. Life, she said bluntly. Mom got sick. Bills piled up. College. That notebook full of places. They turned into shifts at the diner and rent payments. And then. Her voice trailed off. And then what? Daniel pressed gently. Sophia's jaw tightened. And then I got stuck. That's it. That's the grand story of Sophia Reyes, born here, trapped here, probably gonna die here. Daniel studied her, the girl who once shouted her ambitions to the night sky now whispering her regrets to the dark. He could feel the bitterness she carried, years of sacrifice with nothing to show but tired feet and a worn smile. You're not stuck, he said firmly. You just stopped believing you had a way out. Sophia laughed bitterly. Easy for you to say, Daniel. You left. You made something of yourself. Me? I'm just a waitress in a town no one cares about. Daniel's eyes softened, but his tone was steady, resolute. You're not just anything. And maybe I came back to remind you of that. For the first time, Sophia met his gaze and didn't look away. The quiet stretched between them, heavy but charged, like the air before a storm. And in that silence, Daniel knew something unspoken: Sophia hadn't lost her dreams. She'd only buried them under years of survival. It was time to start digging them back up. They ended up at a small park on the edge of town, the kind of place teenagers once used as a hangout and adults mostly forgot existed. The swings creaked softly in the wind, and the rusted merry-go-round glinted under the dim glow of a lone street lamp. Sophia sat on the swing, kicking at the gravel, her hands gripping the cold chains. Daniel leaned against the frame, watching her quietly. "You know," she said after a long pause, "I almost left once." Daniel tilted his head. "Almost?" "Yeah. About 5 years ago. I had my bags packed. Even bought a bus ticket. I was ready to go." She let out a hollow laugh. "But the night before, Mom collapsed. Hospital bills drained everything I had saved. And that was it. Dream over. Ticket never used." Daniel felt a pang in his chest. "Soph." She shrugged, trying to mask the sting with indifference. "Guess it wasn't meant to be." "Or maybe it was," Daniel countered. "Maybe it still is." She looked at him sharply. "Don't do that. Don't give me hope just to take it away. I've had enough of that." His voice lowered, steady but earnest. "I'm not giving you false hope. I'm telling you what's real. You've survived every storm life threw at you. You didn't break, even when it would have been easier to give up. That strength most people don't have." Her eyes searched his face, as if testing whether she could trust his words, or whether they were just the polished lines of a man who had lived an easier life. Finally, she whispered, "Why now, Daniel? Why come back after all these years? Why me?" The question hung in the air. Daniel could have brushed it off, could have given her some simple excuse. But instead, he stepped closer, the space between them closing. "Because I remembered something," he said softly. "I remembered that the only time I ever really believed in myself was when I was around you. And I couldn't stop wondering, if maybe you still needed someone to believe in you too." Sophia's lips parted, her breath catching. She looked away quickly, blinking back the sudden sheen in her eyes. Trust. It had been broken too many times in her life. But in this moment, she wanted to believe him. Needed to. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying away the silence, leaving only the sound of two people standing on the edge of something new, or something old, rediscovered. And for the first time in years, Sophia Reyes didn't feel entirely alone. The night had grown cooler, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones if you linger too long. Sophia pushed off the swing slowly, standing in front of Daniel now. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the street lamp filled the silence, soft and constant. "You make it sound so simple," she said at last. "Like I can just start over." Daniel's eyes didn't waver. "You can. Starting over doesn't erase what you've been through. It builds on it. Everything you've survived. That's not wasted time, Sophia. That's proof you're strong enough for whatever comes next." Her lips trembled into a skeptical smile. "You really believe that?" "I do," he said firmly. "And I believe in you." The words hit her harder than she expected. When was the last time someone had said that to her, meant it without wanting something in return? Sophia looked down, fighting the swell of emotions. "You don't understand. I can't just drop everything. The diner, the bills, my mother." Daniel cut in gently. "Then don't do it alone. Let me help." She froze, staring at him. "Help? Daniel, you left this place, built a whole life. Why would you come back and tie yourself down to someone who can't even climb out of the hole they're in?" His expression softened, but his voice carried weight. "Because maybe my life isn't as complete as it looks from the outside. And maybe what's been missing, has been standing in front of me all along. Sophia's breath hitched. She didn't trust easily, and she knew promises had a way of crumbling when tested by reality. But Daniel's tone didn't sound like empty words. It sounded like choice. Like commitment. And for the first time in years, she let the possibility of a different life flicker in her chest, not a blazing fire, not yet, but a spark. She met his gaze, her eyes wet but unflinching. "If I let you in, Daniel, don't disappear again." His answer came without hesitation. "I won't." The weight of that vow settled between them, heavier than anything else they'd said that night. And under the dim light of that forgotten park, Sophia Reyes allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't look like endless shifts and broken dreams. A future where, just maybe, she wasn't fighting alone. The park grew quiet again, but Sophia's mind was anything but calm. Hope was a dangerous thing, she'd learned that the hard way. It gave you something to reach for, only to yank it out of your grasp when reality reminded you who was really in charge. She folded her arms across her chest, her eyes flicking toward Daniel with hesitation. "You don't get it. This town, it's like quicksand. Once it pulls you under, you don't climb out. People don't change here. They just endure." Daniel stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "Then be the one who does. Don't let this place define you." Sophia gave a bitter laugh. "Easy for you to say. You left. You had options. I never did." Daniel's expression tightened. "Soph, don't rewrite history. You had options, you just chose responsibility over yourself. You stayed when most people would have run. You sacrificed your dreams for everyone else's survival. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger than all of us." She looked at him sharply, her lips parting, but no words came. She wanted to argue, to deny the truth in his voice, but deep down, she knew he was right. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "Do you know how many times I wanted someone to tell me that? That I wasn't just wasting my life?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "I should have been here to say it. I should have never left you behind." The regret in his tone wasn't rehearsed, it was raw, unguarded. And it shook something in her. But just as her defenses started to crumble, the sound of an approaching engine broke the fragile moment. A beat-up sedan pulled up by the curb, headlights cutting through the shadows. Sophia stiffened immediately. "Damn it," she muttered. A man stepped out, his frame lean but wiry, his movements sharp. His eyes locked onto Sophia like a hawk circling prey. Daniel noticed the way her body tensed, the way her hands instinctively curled into fists at her sides. "Who's that?" he asked carefully. Sophia's voice was low, almost ashamed. "Trouble." The man sneered, spitting onto the pavement as he approached. Well. If it isn't Sophia Reyes, out here making friends." Daniel straightened, his muscles coiled. He didn't know who this man was yet, but one thing was certain, Sophia's past wasn't finished with her. And neither was the fight she'd been carrying alone for far too long. The man closed the distance with a swagger that carried menace in every step. His eyes darted to Daniel, sizing him up, then snapping back to Sophia with a crooked grin. "Didn't expect to see you out here, Soph," he drawled. "You've been dodging me." Sophia's voice was flat, controlled, though Daniel caught the tremor beneath. "I told you, Marco. It's over. I don't owe you anything." Marco let out a short laugh, sharp and ugly. "Over? Nothing's over until I say it is." Daniel shifted slightly, angling himself between them without making it obvious. "She said it's over," he said calmly, his tone carrying weight that cut through the night. Marco's gaze flicked to him, irritation flashing in his eyes. "And who the hell are you? Some city boy thinking he can play hero?" Daniel didn't flinch. "Someone who doesn't like seeing a friend harassed." Marco stepped closer, his voice dropping low, venom curling around each word. Careful, stranger. You don't know how things work around here. Sophia tugged at Daniel's sleeve, whispering urgently. Don't. He's dangerous. But Daniel stood his ground, his eyes locked on Marco's. The tension between them was electric, the kind that could snap into violence at any second. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest. Memories flooded back, nights of shouting, fists slammed on tables, debts that chained her to a man she should have walked away from long ago. She hated the fear that crept in at the sight of Marco, hated that he still had that hold on her. Marco leaned closer, smirking. You don't scare me. You're just another outsider who doesn't belong. Daniel's voice stayed calm, but the steel in it was unmistakable. Then maybe it's time someone like me showed you where your power ends. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Sophia's eyes darted between them, caught between terror and a flicker of hope. Because for the first time in years, someone wasn't backing down to Marco. And she realized that maybe, just maybe, the fight she'd buried wasn't gone. It was waiting for this moment. Waiting for someone to stand beside her. Marco's smirk widened, but his jaw ticked in irritation. He wasn't used to resistance, not here, not in this dusty corner of the world where people lowered their eyes and handed him what he wanted. He spat to the side and leaned in close enough for Daniel to catch the stale scent of whiskey on his breath. You think standing here makes you brave? Newsflash, suit man, you'll be gone tomorrow. I'm here every damn day. Daniel didn't blink. His voice was quiet, steady, the kind of tone that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Maybe. But tomorrow isn't what matters. Right now does. Sophia's stomach tightened, her hands trembling at her sides. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to pull Daniel away, to stop this before Marco exploded. But another part of her, the part that remembered who she was before the fear, ached to let it play out. Marco scoffed and shoved a finger hard into Daniel's chest. Stay out of this. She's mine to deal with. The words made Sophia snap. I'm not yours, Marco, she shouted, the force of her voice startling even herself. For a heartbeat, silence fell. Daniel's gaze flicked to her, and in that brief glance, she saw something, a spark of respect, even pride. Marco's grin faltered, then twisted into something darker. You got louder since last time. Guess your new friend's giving you courage. But courage fades. Daniel finally stepped closer, closing the last inch between them until their faces were nearly level. His words came out sharp as glass. Walk away. Tonight. Or the next time you cross her, you won't like the consequences. The air grew razor thin, charged with the possibility of violence. Marco's hand twitched at his side, like he was deciding whether to throw the first punch. Sophia held her breath. She knew Marco was reckless enough to strike, but she also knew he wasn't stupid. And Daniel. Daniel wasn't bluffing. The diner's neon buzz filled the silence, its flicker painting their faces in harsh reds and yellows. Finally, Marco leaned back, his sneer masking a hesitation he didn't want to admit. This ain't over, he hissed. Not by a long shot. If you believe stories like this should be told, hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below because your voice matters, too. He turned sharply, boots grinding gravel as he stalked back into the shadows of the. You think standing here makes you brave? Newsflash, suit man, you'll be on the interstate by tomorrow. Me? I'll still be here. And Sophia? Marco tilted his head, his eyes narrowing on her. She always comes back around. Doesn't matter how many times she swears she's done. Sophia's fists clenched at her sides. That was years ago, Marco. I told you, I'm not yours to control. Marco let out a mocking laugh. Control? No, sweetheart. Let's call it, unfinished business. Daniel stepped forward, just enough to force Marco to adjust his stance. His tone was low, even, but there was no mistaking the steel behind it. She doesn't owe you a damn thing. Not money. Not time. Not herself. You're done. Marco's grin faltered for the first time. He wasn't used to someone meeting his stare head-on, let alone refusing to back down. He tried to cover the crack with bluster. You've got no idea what you're stepping into. Guys like me, we don't forget. And we don't forgive. Daniel didn't blink. Neither do men like me. For a moment, it was just silence, the kind of silence that hummed louder than any shout. Sophia's breath caught, her body trembling between fear of Marco's rage and shock at Daniel's unflinching defiance. Marco finally scoffed, stepping back, his bravado slipping into a sneer. Fine. Enjoy your little reunion. But remember this, Mercer, Yuma doesn't play by your rules. Out here, I write the book. He jabbed a finger at Daniel's chest before turning to Sophia. His smile returned, colder than before. We'll finish this another night. With that, Marco stalked back to his car, the engine growling to life before it roared down the road, leaving only a cloud of dust in his wake. Sophia's knees nearly buckled, and she gripped the swing's chain for balance. Daniel caught her arm gently, steadying her. You okay? He asked softly. Her voice was shaky but firm. I hate him. I hate that he can still walk up and make me feel small. Like I'm still trapped. Daniel's hand tightened over hers, steady and unyielding. You're not trapped anymore, sophomore. Not while I'm here. He doesn't get to write your story. Not anymore. For the first time in years, she believed that might be true. The night had grown quiet again after Marco's car disappeared, but the weight of his presence still lingered in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Sophia sank onto the swing, her shoulders slumping as though the confrontation had drained every ounce of strength from her. Daniel stayed beside her, silent for a moment, letting her breathe. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. You don't get it, Daniel. Marco's not just some angry ex. He's connected. People around here don't cross him because he's got favors everywhere. A cop cousin. A brother in construction. Half the town owes him something. She rubbed her temples. He'll make my life hell just to prove a point. Daniel crouched down, meeting her eyes. His voice was calm, but there was a steady fire behind it. Then we don't give him the chance. She let out a humorless laugh. Easier said than done. You'll leave, and I'll still be here wiping down counters and ducking when he walks in. Daniel shook his head. Not this time. You're not staying here. Sophia blinked, startled. What do you mean? He straightened up, brushing dust from his hands. I meant what I said inside, sophomore. I've got opportunities. Real ones. Places you can go, jobs you can do. You don't have to rot in this town waiting for Marco's shadow to fall on you again. Her throat tightened, and she shook her head. Daniel, that's not my life anymore. I can't just pick up and leave. People don't get second chances out of nowhere. Daniel's gaze softened. You gave me a second chance once, remember? Back in school, when I was about ready to quit everything, classes, sports, the whole future. You made me stick it out. That was my turning point. And now, maybe it's yours. Sophia looked away, her eyes glistening as she focused on the cracked pavement beneath her shoes. You make it sound so simple. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a slim card, placing it in her hand. It's not simple. But it's possible. This is my assistant's number. If you call it, doors open. Training, housing, work. Everything you thought you lost, you can rebuild it. Her fingers curled around the card like it was a lifeline she wasn't ready to believe in. For the first time in years, hope stirred inside her chest, and it scared her more than Marco ever did. The media storm had not calmed, it had only intensified. Headlines screamed about the janitor who owned it all, documentaries were already in production, and social media feeds were flooded with clips of James' quiet dignity contrasted against the arrogance of those who mocked him. But behind the spectacle, James felt a growing weight. Legacy wasn't just about money or headlines, it was about responsibility. Every move he made now wasn't just about him, it shaped the lives of thousands who worked under his umbrella of companies. One evening, as he sat in his modest living room, the same one he had lived in long before the truth came out, his granddaughter climbed into his lap, holding one of her picture books. "Grandpa," she asked softly, "are you really the boss of all those people?" James smiled gently. "I suppose I am, little one. But being the boss doesn't mean you get to be above people. It means you're responsible for them." Her small brow furrowed as she processed the thought. "So, being the boss means you have to take care of everyone?" James chuckled, but his eyes glistened with emotion. "Yes. Exactly that." It was a truth so simple, yet so easily forgotten by those blinded by greed and power. Meanwhile, Robert, the man who had once been the golden boy of the company, sat alone in his lavish but empty penthouse. The walls, though adorned with expensive art, felt suffocating. His phone buzzed endlessly with messages from old colleagues, investors, and journalists, but none of it mattered anymore. The empire he thought he controlled had slipped from his grasp, all because he underestimated the man in coveralls with a mop. And while James had never sought revenge, Robert was haunted by his own arrogance. The world had not just turned against him, it had moved past him, leaving him behind as a cautionary tale. James, however, focused not on the past but on the future. He began setting up scholarships for janitors' children, programs to help workers rise through the ranks, and initiatives that made sure no one ever felt invisible the way he once had. Because to him, wealth wasn't about the cars, the mansions, or the flashy suits. Wealth was about creating opportunities where there had been none before. And in that, James found his true reward. For he had not only cleaned floors. He had cleaned the very system of arrogance and greed that had overlooked people like him for generations. And in doing so, he had built a legacy, not of power, but of humanity. Years passed, but the story of James, the janitor turned hidden owner, never faded. It became something more than just a headline or a viral clip. It grew into a lesson whispered in boardrooms, classrooms, and break rooms alike: never underestimate the quiet ones. Never mistake humility for weakness. The company itself had transformed. No longer just a symbol of wealth and hierarchy, it became a living reminder of what happens when leadership comes from compassion instead of pride. Workers walked the halls with a different kind of energy, no longer afraid of being dismissed or overlooked. For the first time, they felt seen. James rarely sat in the grand office reserved for the CEO. Instead, he would visit the cafeteria, sit among the staff, and listen. His presence was never about intimidation, it was about connection. One rainy afternoon, a young janitor named Luis approached him timidly. "Sir. I just wanted to thank you," Luis stammered. "Because of the scholarship program you started, my daughter's going to college next year. She's the first in our family to ever do that." James clasped the young man's shoulder, his voice steady but warm. "That's the real success, Luis. Not the profits. Not the headlines. Seeing doors open that were once locked shut, that's what matters." Meanwhile, the tale of Robert, the once arrogant executive, served as the stark contrast. His name became synonymous with pride, his fall replayed in business schools as a cautionary tale. Where James was remembered for building people up, Robert was remembered for trying to tear them down. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, James sat quietly in the same modest home where it had all begun. His granddaughter, now older, sat beside him doing her homework. She paused, looking up at him with that same curious spark she had as a child. "Grandpa," she said, "why didn't you ever move into one of those big houses like the other rich people?" James smiled, gazing at the worn walls filled with family photos. Because, sweetheart, a house doesn't make a home. And money doesn't make a man. It's what you do with both that matters. That night, as he watched the city lights flicker in the distance, James knew something with absolute certainty. He hadn't just left behind an empire. He had left behind a story, one that would be told long after he was gone. A story of a janitor who rose, not by stepping on others, but by lifting them. A story that proved greatness doesn't need a suit, a title, or a spotlight. Greatness can wear coveralls. Greatness can carry a mop. Greatness can be silent. And sometimes, the quietest giants leave the loudest legacy. When the world first heard about James, many called it unbelievable. A janitor owning the very empire where he scrubbed floors? It sounded like a fable. But the truth was more powerful than fiction, because it proved that the measure of a person is not in the titles they carry, but in the character they live by. James never sought the spotlight, yet the world could not look away. His humility cut deeper than any speech, his kindness carried more weight than any fortune. Where others built empires of ego, James built a foundation of dignity, respect, and opportunity. For every worker who once felt invisible, his story became a torch. For every child who thought dreams were out of reach, his legacy became a door. And for every leader blinded by arrogance, his life became a mirror, reflecting what true greatness really looks like. Robert's downfall faded into the shadows of history. James' rise, however, became eternal. Not because he was the wealthiest. Not because he was the most powerful. But because he never forgot where he came from, or who he truly was. The janitor. The giant. The man who proved that silence can be stronger than thunder. And as long as stories are told, his will remain a beacon. That greatness wears no uniform, no label, no disguise. It lives in humility. It thrives in kindness. And it echoes, long after the man is gone. If you believe stories like this should be told, hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below because your voice matters, too.